My son George always had the strangest friends. For some reason, he was a magnet for odd kids. One story stands out more than the rest. It was when George was in the 4th grade. We'd just moved to a new town because of my husband's job reassignment. George was adjusting well to his new school, and he seemed genuinely happy. A few months after the move, I received a call from the school asking me to come in about an incident involving George. My husband was at work, so I went. As we walked into the school, George refused to say anything about what had happened. That silence was strange for him. Normally, George would talk endlessly. I assumed he was embarrassed or scared. The principal greeted us and asked George to wait outside while we spoke privately. He began by asking me a lot of basic questions about George's behavior. I answered honestly. George was respectful, well-mannered, and never the kind of kid to start trouble. Then, the principal told me George had hit another student named Sebastian. Apparently, they were the last 2 kids walking up from recess when George suddenly pulled an eraser from his pocket and hit Sebastian on the head. No one else saw it, but both boys gave consistent stories. The principal assured me George wasn't in trouble, but they wanted to keep me informed. Later that night, George finally explained. He said they were pretending to play Street Fighter, and Sebastian had told him to use the eraser for a finishing move. George did it, and Sebastian immediately dropped and began screaming. Then, George said Sebastian whispered in his ear that if he didn't pretend it was real, he'd get hurt for real. I was furious. My son had been manipulated. I found Sebastian's mum's number in the school directory. Her name was Maggie. To my surprise, she was sweet and calm. She admitted Sebastian had told her everything, and she had already punished him. She said Sebastian had always struggled with behavioral issues, and sometimes acted like another person. Still, she sounded genuine, and I felt for her. She even suggested that the boys have a sleepover to rebuild trust. I agreed, and she offered to host. That weekend, I brought George to her house. Maggie invited me in, and we chatted over wine while the boys played in the basement. She seemed like a kind, normal mom. Eventually, I asked her more about Sebastian. She hesitated, then admitted he had trouble keeping friends and was seeing doctors. Some believed he'd outgrow it, and he'd never been violent. Just strange. I felt reassured. When it was time to leave, I went to the basement. The boys were playing Battleship, laughing like old friends. I kissed George goodnight and went home. The next morning, when I picked him up, George looked happy, but once we were in the car, he started crying. Through tears, he told me what happened. In the middle of the night, George woke up and heard whispering. It was coming from the basement bathroom. He saw candlelight and Sebastian inside, talking to the mirror, calling himself Mr. Jim. George watched silently as Sebastian spoke in a strange language. Then the light went out. A while later, George heard whispering again, this time right above him. He was too afraid to move. Eventually, Sebastian went back to sleep as if nothing happened. George never brought it up with him. I was horrified. I called Maggie. At first, she laughed it off. But after I pressed her, she admitted Sebastian's issues were more serious. A doctor had mentioned multiple personality disorder. They'd moved twice before, after similar incidents. Then, she asked me not to tell the school. I didn't know how to respond. I just hung up. Before I could decide what to do, the school sent out a notice. Sebastian had attacked another student at recess. He was expelled. I tried calling Maggie, but the number was disconnected. When I went to the house, it was empty. No signs of moving, no forwarding address. They were just gone. That was years ago. George seems to have moved on, but I haven't. I still wonder what happened in that basement, and what might have happened if George hadn't woken up. My eldest son started sleepwalking when he was about 8 or 9. I'd heard that some kids go through phases like that, so I wasn't too concerned at first. It was strange, sure, but I figured it was just one of those childhood quirks that would pass. I'm a light sleeper, so it didn't take long for me to notice. He couldn't sneak anywhere in the house without me waking up. Most nights, I'd find him standing in the hallway just outside my bedroom door, rocking slightly on his heels. His eyes were open, but they weren't seeing anything. That was the part that always gave me chills. If you've ever lived with a sleepwalker, You know what I mean? Those blank, glassy eyes that seemed to stare right through you. It felt like he was looking at something I couldn't see. Sometimes he'd mumble, too quiet to understand. Other times he just stood there, breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. I'd gently take his hand, whisper his name, and guide him back to bed. He never remembered any of it in the morning. It escalated a few months later. One night I woke up to a soft, rhythmic tapping sound. It reminded me of water dripping onto glass. But it wasn't raining. It was faint, barely enough to wake me, but it kept going. Tap, tap, tap. Always at the same interval. My husband slept through it, but I got out of bed to check. I found him in the hallway, standing perfectly still, his forehead gently knocking against the wall in those same soft, rhythmic taps. His fingertips brushed the wall in sync with his head, like he was trying to feel his way into something that wasn't there. I called his name, barely above a whisper. No response. He just kept tapping. I stepped closer, hesitated for a moment, because something about it genuinely unsettled me, then placed a hand on his shoulder and gently shook him. He blinked, stepped back, and let me lead him back to bed like nothing had happened. He never spoke of it. It happened again, maybe twice after that, then stopped. I chalked it up to sleepwalking oddities and assumed he'd outgrown it. Years passed. The memory faded, but then my younger son started doing it, around the same age too. At first I thought nothing of it. Kids copy their siblings. Maybe he was mimicking something he'd seen years ago, but I realized quickly that wasn't possible. He hadn't witnessed any of it. His brother had stopped long before he was old enough to remember, and yet the behaviors were identical. Standing in the hallway, swaying from foot to foot, eyes open but vacant. The same strange rhythm. Then, one night, I heard it again, the tapping. My heart sank. I stepped into the hallway, and there he was, forehead pressed to the exact same spot, tapping gently like he was trying to walk into the wall. His fingertips brushed the surface, and I realized I was watching the exact same scene from years ago all over again. I called his name. Nothing. I touched his shoulder. Still nothing. He just kept tapping, lost in a place I couldn't follow. That's when it hit me. There was no logical reason he would act this way, no shared memory between the boys. It wasn't just sleepwalking, it was something else, something shared. Eventually I got him back to bed, and soon after, the episode stopped, just like with his brother. Both boys eventually outgrew the behavior. Life moved on, until a few weeks ago. Now that both boys are off at college, the house feels quieter. My husband and I decided to do some light renovations. New paint, updated flooring, simple things. When we started stripping the old wallpaper in the upstairs hallway, I found something strange. Beneath the paper, embedded into the wall, was an antique-style mirror. It had been completely covered up. At first, I thought it was just a strange choice by the previous owners, but then I realized it was positioned in the exact spot where both my sons had stood, years apart, tapping their foreheads. I froze. There was no way they could have known it was there. It had been covered their entire lives. But somehow, they knew. I didn't wait. I had the mirror removed that same day. I didn't want to look at it, didn't want it in the house. I don't know if there's a rational explanation. Maybe it's all coincidence. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that something had been calling to them, through the wall, through their dreams. Something neither of them remembers, but I do. I'm a single mother of 2. My ex-husband and I take turns watching the kids month to month. My son Luke is 15, and my daughter Melissa is 10. This happened just a few months ago. I had to do some late-night grocery shopping after work. Earlier that day, Luke texted me that he was going out with some friends. It was a Friday night. I wasn't thrilled about him leaving Melissa alone, but 10 is an age when many parents start allowing their kids a bit more independence. And truthfully, I couldn't expect Luke to babysit every time. I got home a little after 9, juggling 4 trips from the car, because I'd bought way too many groceries. I always overdo it on the months I have the kids, then barely buy anything when I'm alone. Once everything was stocked away, I headed upstairs to greet Melissa. I heard the shower running, so I figured she was winding down for the night. I didn't want to interrupt, so I went back downstairs, plopped onto the couch, and turned on a Netflix show. Half an episode passed, and I realized the water was still running. That irritated me. Hot showers aren't cheap, and I'd always taught my kids not to waste water. I headed back upstairs to knock on the bathroom door. I knocked and called out, reminding her not to take too long. No answer. I went back down, trying to give her another few minutes, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I went back up again, this time knocking louder, even calling her name with some frustration. That's when I noticed something strange. The light under the bathroom door was off. The shower was still going, but the light was out. That didn't make any sense. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. But our interior locks are old and can be easily opened with a fingernail or coin. So I pushed the door open, now more concerned than angry. As the door creaked open, I flipped the light switch and stormed in, still half expecting to scold Melissa. But what I saw stopped me cold. There, lying flat in the bathtub, was a woman, not Melissa, a fully grown, withered-looking woman, probably in her 50s. She was lying in the tub, water pouring down over her fully clothed body. I screamed. I screamed louder than I ever had before. My back hit the mirror, and all the items on the counter went crashing to the floor. I was frozen, overwhelmed by shock and terror. The woman slowly sat up and looked directly at me. Her long grey hair hung wet and limp across her face. She didn't say a word. She just stared. I slammed the bathroom door shut and ran to Melissa's room, screaming her name. I found her hiding under the covers. She was shaking. I yanked her from the bed, pulling her close, and we raced out of the room. As we passed the bathroom, I saw that woman standing in the doorway, soaked, unmoving, watching us. Everything about her, her movements, her face, looked wrong, like a zombie, like something that shouldn't be alive. I grabbed my phone and rushed Melissa with me into the basement spare room. I locked the door and called the police. While we waited, Melissa told me she'd heard the front door open and thought it was me returning from the store. But when she peeked, she saw a terrifying stranger walking slowly up the stairs. That's when she hid in her room. Turns out Luke had left the front door unlocked when he went out. The police arrived quickly. I told them everything, what I saw, what Melissa saw, how the woman looked, soaked, disoriented, with long grey hair. But there wasn't much to go on. She was gone by the time they searched. No sign of her in the house. Not in the closets, not under the beds, not behind the curtain. She came in and vanished. They think she was likely under the influence of something heavy. I'd never seen anyone look so completely out of it, yet still manage to move like that. I don't even know if charges could have been pressed if they found her, but they didn't. And believe me, Luke got an earful. He hasn't forgotten to lock a door since.